Hello, welcome to the Crates Motel. My name's Conan. In a previous 101 video, I went through how important it is to get a good signal as you go into the MPC and the various processes that you can go through when sampling. In today's 101 video, I'm going to show you how to trim that sample and prepare for chopping. Let's jump in. Okay, so we're going to start cold and dark in the MPC. I've switched it on, hit new project. Here we have the main screen. I now want to go to Sampler. I described in a previous video how to sample into the MPC, so if you want to know more about that, feel free to watch that video. I've got a sample here ready that I'm going to sample in. Let's just get a good level on that. That seems fine. So if I hit arm, as soon as I hit play, it's going to start recording. That's all I need. Just got 2 bars there. So when you go to this screen, you could now name the sample. I'm just going to leave it as new sample in this case. With the track, it's where the sample would go if I just wanted to immediately put it onto its own track without creating my own track. The creating my own track is going to be a different video. So just for today, we're going to leave it on drum 001. That's the initial track that's loaded up when you just hit new project. Here you can assign it to a pad. You can either hit the pad or you can select it with the data wheel. We'll leave it on A01 for now. And here you choose the root note. Now, as far back as I can remember, I'm pretty certain my MPC 60, by default, you start off as C3. I just always leave it on C3. Occasionally, there are reasons why you might want to change that, perhaps if you want to build up key groups, etc. But you can always change what your root note is at a later date anyway. So me personally, there's no right or wrong here, but me personally, I just leave it as C3. So we've set all that up. We've named it, we've decided it wants to go on drum track 1, we've assigned the pad, we've chosen the root note, keep. So now if we go into sample edit, you can see that we have the sample. Now that looks pretty good to me, doesn't need normalizing or anything, it's in a pretty good place. You can see the peaks are all good. Each individual pad when you're in sample edit has its own purpose. Now, you might not use all of them and you might not feel the need to memorize each individual one. I can never actually remember exactly what all of them do. And the reason is that the way that my brain works, and obviously it's different for everybody, but the way that my brain works is I keep the information in my head that I actually really need. If I don't really need the information, it goes, I don't see the point in keeping it in my head. So I haven't learned all these pads because I don't use all these pads. However, if you go into the MPC manual, it does actually tell you. I have it in front of me right here on my computer screen, so I can tell you. But basically, play from start. Play to start, 1 shot. That's obviously not going to do anything because I haven't got the start set. I'll show you in a second. Play to end gives you about a second from the end of the sample. 1 shot again, like I said, and play from end. That's not going to do anything either because I've got nothing under the endpoint. Play from start, note on. So it's the same as the bottom row, but this time it's keeping your finger on it. Here we have play all. Play sample 1 shot. Play sample note on. The top ones I do tend to use: play loop, play to loop start, play from loop start, and play loop continuous. Now, I'll be honest with you, I use 2, and that is play from start 1 shot, occasionally that one, and then the last one I use is play loop continuous, and I'll show you why I tend to just use those ones. But there's no right or wrong here. You develop your own workflow and you choose exactly which ones you want to use. And like I said, there's no magic here. I don't memorize this. I'm reading from the MPC manual, which I've got right in front of me. Can't remember exactly what page it's on because I've just cut out the exact page that I need. So my bad, don't know what the page is, but it's easy enough to find if you just go into the sample edit section in the MPC manual. So whilst I'm trimming, I tend to just use this one here and sometimes that one. So the aim of trimming is to get a start and end point on your actual sample. Now, there's 2 different ways to do this, and I have actually made a video. When you've decided what you want to keep, you can discard or you can extract. That's what I've made a previous video on, and I'll explain that in a second. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that because today I just really want to show you how to actually trim. So basically, you can see here you have a start point, and that's where your sample that you want to keep will start, and then you have an end point, that's where it will finish. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. You can keep as much or as little of the sample. You know, if you just want to keep a snare drum or whatever, you're going to be that kind of that kind of length, obviously more accurate. But if you want the entire loop, it's obviously going to be a bit longer. It's going to be that kind of length. So you can change it with your fingers if you want. You can change it with the Q links. I can't remember exactly which ones they are because I don't tend to use them. With the Q links, again, there's no right or wrong here. It's a workflow thing. So I'm going to show you how I trim. I don't tend to use the Q links to set the start or end points or the loop points or anything. I tend to use the Q links on Q link 4. You can see here, I use it to zoom in, which I believe is that one. That's right. See, I can't even remember. Okay. So the reason why I like that is because I can just really, really easily zoom in and out. And then I select start or end point here. That's how I like to work. It just, for me, it's just the easiest way, personally. But like I said, there's no right or wrong here. And as I said, and I keep saying, as I said, so I'm going to try and stop doing that. As I said previously, this is how I trim. But there are other ways to do it, obviously. So what we'll do is we'll just trim the sample. I'll show you how to do start and end parts. Simple as that. It's a very, very simple process. It really doesn't have to be complicated. So obviously you can hear I'm pretty much in the right place. And that's because I set up the threshold in the original sample when I was sampling in. So let's just zoom into the start point. Okay. Now, there's a little trick that you have here called zero snap. And it's always good to have that on. What zero snap does is it only allows you to set the sample at a point where there's a zero crossover point. And without going into too much detail, you can see here it's kind of at zero. It's not kind of at zero, it's exactly at zero. What that does is it stops pops, or at least it helps eliminate them as much as possible. It doesn't actually always completely eliminate them, but most of the time it will eliminate any kind of pops. So that sounds pretty good to me. But I'm going to be honest, that sounds better. And that won't be at zero. And that's why you do have to use your ears a little bit. You know, sometimes zero snapping can really, really help you out, but other times zero snapping it's not going to be quite right. You'll listen to it and it's just not quite right. What I tend to do is I tend to close my eyes. Another trick that I use for start, this is an old SP1200 trick because we didn't have visual reference, is I'll slow the sample all the way down. So it gives me, I can really, really home in with my ears on the start of the sample. So you can hear there is actually a little bit of a click there. Okay, but if I go to zero snap, that click has gone. However, whilst that click is actually there, I don't think it's going to be a problem. And that's just from experience. Okay, so we've got the start set. With the end, you can use your fingers to get yourself in a rough place. Now, just from experience, I knew that that's roughly where it was. So that wasn't just any kind of magic there. It was literally from experience. But as you can see, that's roughly where I want to be. So I then want to go into end there and I can zoom in. And again, zero snap is helping me here because it's going to eliminate any clicks. For me, this is where I feel personally from experience that zero snap does help a lot more. If you're going to be using loops, it just kind of helps eliminate the click. And also if you just want to use like tiny one-shot snares and things like that as well. So what I do at this point is I hit the loop. And again, with the closing eyes thing and just using my ears thing, the reason why I do that is because then I don't have any visual reference. I'll just close my eyes and I'll listen to the loop. See, to me, it doesn't quite sound right. There is a little bit of, it maybe sounds a little bit late. No, you know what? It was right first time. So, you know, it's a bit of trial and error. Sometimes your ears don't quite get it right. So close your eyes if you like. That's a good way of doing it. And just keep listening to the sample until you get it right. So that's why I tend to use those two. That one just gives me a good start point, and this one is the loop. Yeah, I mean, that sounds spot on to me now. So it's really that simple as just, if you're just doing basic trimming, and that's what I want to cover today in this 101, is just basic trimming, because I feel if I go into too much detail, it's going to start putting too much information and you start forgetting things. I don't know if you feel that way, but me personally, I don't know whether it's, whether I've got any kind of condition. I'm not going to say what these conditions are, some kind of condition, but basically after about 10 to 15 minutes, my brain can start thinking, there's too much information now. So I'm breaking these up into little chunks. So this is very, very basic trimming that I'm showing you here. So you set a start point, you set an end point, you get that into where you want it to be, whether it is a loop or whether it's a single, just one shot snare, etc. And then what you want to do is you want to get rid of all the stuff that's left that you don't really need anymore. So the ways that you could do that, go into process. You can either do discard, which is going to chop the start and the end off, or you can go into extract, which takes out the part in the middle, and it will leave the end and it will leave the start and the end, but it won't destroy it. You'll still have it as a separate sample. And the reason why I tend to personally use that is because I can then go back into the parts at the end if I do need to, and I don't have to resample again. But I've explained that in another video in a lot more detail. But so today I'm just going to go with discard and just get rid of the start and the finish. What's before the start and what's after the end point. So there we go. Now you can see that we just have, if I zoom in and out, if I zoom completely out, we just have that sample. So there you have it. That was a very, very basic 101 breakdown of trimming in the MPC. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to it, and I'm going to go into more detail when we get into chopping in the next 101. But like I explained in the video, I want to break this up into smaller pieces so that you can just watch one video and then watch the next video and just keep it very, very simple. So thanks for watching. This is the Crates Motel. My name's Conan. Till next time.